Hello, everyone. This is Vernon, and welcome to part 5 of Chasing Time Travelers. I showed you this one last time, interplanetary travel with using interplanetary magnetic fields. Let me say a little bit more about this. I've been dealing with these concepts for a long time, so I forget that I haven't really explained them to other people. But a sock bay, I'll show you a picture later on in Chichen Itza. But a sock bay is it's called a sacred white path, and it's they vary in length, but they usually about they vary in width and in length, but they're usually about the width of a car or two, and they are raised platforms that go between different places in a given Mayan temple city and between temple cities. And so I think there are so many fascinating things about sock bays. For instance, here's, here's what I think is interesting just culturally. It's that some of the contemporary Mayas know where those ancient sock bays are because their grandmothers told them, and their grandmothers told them, right? It's been passed along through generations, and I think that's going to be important one day because when humans want to know how to get from Earth to some other specific planet, and the sock bays are not apparent, there will be people, from the Mayas who know. There's an interesting story about there was like an American archaeologist and a Mayan guy, his guide or something, and they were going through the jungle in the Yucatan, and uh, and the Mayans stopped and he looked around, and the American archaeologist was like, "Come on, let's go. We got to make time." The guy says, "Wait a minute." He says we have to tread lightly here. This is an ancient sock bay. The American didn't see it, but the Mayan knew it because he had learned it from his his relatives, right? Like his aunts, his mom or grandmother or somebody. And because you got to remember, some if not many of those sock bays have been grown over, and so unless you kind of know the lay of the land, you walk right over one and have no clue what you just did. Okay, so I wanted to just say a little more about that. And so now let's go on to something else. So this is a map of Chichen Itza on the left. It's not complete. It's only half of the map of Chichen Itza. It's the part that I've seen, and well, most of what I've seen. Uh, there's a part of Chichen Itza I've never been to. It's called the Initial Series Group. Sometimes it's called Old Chichen, and my theory is that the Initial Series Group or Old Chichen represents South America. And what you're looking at here is a map of the Northern Hemisphere. So, for instance, at the, well, how do I say this? If you go to Chichen Itza, you won't see half the stuff that I have in my little drawing here because a lot of those images, a lot of those little things have been put into museums. But to make a long story short, if you look at that red arrow, right? Well, the point there is that the pyramid of Kukulkan that the thing is pointing to, that we see in Chichen Itza, actually represents Mount Pico in the Azores, and so that's like the main landmark for me in getting oriented at Chichen Itza. And so you'll see that when we head north, we're going to be at that circle of water that represents the water around the North Pole and so on. Again, the Yucatan Hall of Records, it's basically a map, myths, and rituals. And there are some implications of games, tic-tac-toe, and I'll explain why. So I want to spend the rest of this section, this particular video, talking about I'll say mirrors, I'll say duplication. How about that? So here's an image that I got from the Mesoamerican meeting, to give them credit, is in Austin in January 2018. And what the archaeologists said is that when Mayas wanted to show a mirror, they put it in a frame. So on the left is a mirror, and so the guy on the right, the point is that he's he's like sitting in front of a mirror. So let's consider the border around the sarcophagus of Lord Pakal. And if borders are mirrors, if borders mean mirrors and mirrors mean duplicate, let's try duplicating this. I'm sort of presenting this to you backwards. I wasn't nearly this logical in discovering it, but I'll pretend for the time being. So let's duplicate this sarcophagus. This is not the original one. This is the one down in the museum in Chet Umal at the border of Mexico and Belize. So I've duplicated the image of the sarcophagus of Lord Pakal, the lid anyway. And I don't see anything particularly interesting here. Here's a different image of the sarcophagus of Pakal with the border removed. Now let's duplicate this one. Okay, it looks like we're starting to get something in the middle. Looks like a tree trunk, sort of fancy. And let's as we can see, both the obviously it's the same guy because I duplicated it, but he's facing the same direction. Let's try making him face opposite directions and see what happens with that thing in the middle. So now they're facing opposite directions, and with back to back, and then we start to get this image. It looks like a tree, a fancy tree, obviously. And if you look up and sort of go a little bit beyond halfway up, inside that red oval, it looks like an old bird with fangs and a beak and tail feathers, and it's almost like he's flexing his muscles, his wings, and he seems to have some sort of animal crown on his head. When I saw this, I interpreted it as a devil bird, because you got to remember, I never studied Mayan archaeology or anthropology, any of that stuff, not formally. So I just Googled Mayan devil bird, and it said there was a god named Vukabkakwish, and who had this conflict with the Maize God Twins. And I'm like, well, all right, so these guys would be the twins, and that's Vukabkakwish. Great. Let's try reversing the image so that the guys are looking in opposite directions, except they're facing each other. Well, when I do that, look at that image in the red. It still looks like some sort of devil bird, except the guy looks younger and meaner and madder, like it's a skeleton with wings and talons. He's got his mouth open, wider, like I'm coming to bite you. He's got his talons out. I don't know what those 3 dots are under the talons, like he's bombing you. I don't know. But and look at his head. He's got like this crown on. And but he looks younger than the other one, right? So when we put these two together, when I did some research on it, I interpreted these to mean that these images to mean that the one on the left was Vukabkakwish and the Maize God Twins, and the image on the right is the son of Vukabkakwish, Zipacna, and the Hero Twins. The thing I found out later is that there actually are images from, I think, from Izapa, where they show the Hero Twins at the base of a tree and Vukabkakwish in the tree. So I don't think this is coincidental. So I will stop. Wait, do I stop here?